Have you ever believed that vivid memories are a sign of divine experience? Well, today we're dissecting the psychology behind reconsolidated memory to show why these memories aren't evidence of anything supernatural. Join us as we uncover the truth behind memory's tricks and what it really tells us about our past encounters with faith. So, welcome back to Answers from Genesis. I'm Genesis, and I once trusted every clear memory as a sign from above.
And I'm Alan. And while I didn't have those same type of beliefs, I know many Christians that I have encountered in my life that thought their vivid memories were messages directly from God as well.
And most people just feel like, and I did, that these were divinely inspired memories.
Oh, absolutely. When you're the person having it and you believe it's from God because that's the circles you walk in, yeah, it seems like undeniable proof, for sure.
Now, today we'll expose how our minds reshape and even create those memories, continuing our series, Addicted to God, inspired by Ellen's insightful upcoming book. So we value your perspective, so drop a comment below.
Yeah, and we've only 30 minutes to debunk the misconceptions that bind us here in this show. So,
all right, Alan, are you ready to start the timer and explore how these memories can mislead us?
Let's do it. Let's decode the deception of our recollections.
All right. So today we are going to talk about something called reconsolidated memories. But before we really get into that, let's talk about how dreams and near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and all this kind of stuff, first of all, how do people use those to explain the supernatural?
I think because they don't know how to explain it any other way, the inclination is to accredit it to something other than natural. So they credit it to the supernatural.
So they don't understand. It's something that they don't know any other way to explain it. And so when we don't know how to explain something, we like to explain something, right? We don't like to be in the I don't know. That's the worst place to be, is in the I don't know, right? So when we don't know something, then we're going to assign something to that. And I've actually made videos on this in other areas that the Israelites actually didn't know what certain things were, like energy or consciousness. And so they assigned it the term God. And that's all they did, right? So here we've got people that they don't know what these experiences are in their life. So they just call them supernatural. Now, I've actually seen a lot of people leave Christianity and do this. Alan, have you?
Yeah. I even know people who are not Christians and are not ascribing it to Yahweh per se, but still the idea of not knowing is a very uncomfortable place to be. So rather than just say, I don't know, which is a completely legit answer until you have something that actually is verifiable and makes sense, the easier thing to do is just ascribe it to something we don't know and just make something up. And I don't think we should do that, but for some reason it makes people feel comfortable to have something that explains it. So they'll refer to it as an angel or a spiritual experience or something beyond the natural. And really, most of it, well, actually, I would say all of it can be explained scientifically. We just may not know exactly what your experience was to be able to put it into a tester and figure it out. So, most of the time people just describe it to something supernatural and just leave it at that, and they just run with it. They don't want to test it, because then that takes away the glory of it. When you find out your dream was just triggered by like a piece of your brain that just can be triggered by a tool a doctor put in there, then suddenly it's like, oh man, I guess I didn't have experience with an angel, and it just sounds sad, So Christians just like, or even non-Christians that have left it, still like to replace it and want to have these experiences that make them feel special.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so do I understand you right that you did not have any of these kinds of experiences yourself?
For the most part, that is correct. When I think I gave one story that I recalled believing that Satan was in my room and messing with me on a mission trip one time. Um, and that was because I really believe in Satan and everything. But by and large, I didn't have those kinds of experiences. And obviously, looking back on that Satan experience now, I obviously recognize it was just a fan blowing the curtain. So I totally blew it out of proportion because I wanted to have that sort of a experience, but no, by and large, I was not the kind of Christian that believed that we were constantly entertaining angels unaware, or having experiences with God all the time in the physical realm. I truly believe that all of it was, as we said 2-3 episodes ago, I can't remember, where the natural transitioned into the spiritual. And so we were now living in a spiritual relationship with God where he was no longer doing that stuff in the natural realm. So no, I did not attribute any experiences aside from that one to some supernatural thing. I just recognized that life just happens, and I believed there was some scientific explanation for it. But that's the way my mind always worked. I didn't have the need to explain everything. It just wasn't a part of my nature. I was confident enough in my relationship with God. I knew I loved him. My relationship with God wasn't based on how I felt in any given moment. It wasn't based on whether he was giving me an experience. It wasn't based on whether I could speak in tongues or see an angel. Mine was based on surely faith alone. And my faith was based on the promises of his word. And that's all I needed. And that was good enough for me.
Well, most Christians, they want that faith alone, and then they're going to justify it with their experiences. They're going to back it up, those experiences, right? And so I hear this probably every single day in my conversations that I have, not only with Christians, but this episode in particularly is going to apply to people who are not Christians either. I see it all the time. People leave Christianity and they want to be spiritual. They want to be, there's something in the supernatural. They still want to take something with them, and they're taking their experiences with them. So they can't explain their experiences. And so I'm just going to share one experience because we have to have an experience in this episode in order for it to make sense, right? So I'll just share one experience that I had.
That's why you're here. I mean, I need somebody to validate my views. So thank you, Jed.
Okay. And just so people understand that, because I do get this all the time. Well, you've never had an experience with God, right? Actually, I had a whole bunch, but one of them that I remember was I was in Germany, and we had a German van, and it was very different from an American van. It's hard to explain, but anyway, it didn't go up hills very easily. And I was at the University of Heidelberg, which is a historic university, and there's underground parking. And so I had my kids with me, and we're coming out of the underground parking, and you come out and then you go up to get to the street. And so you pay and then go up. So I'm going up, and my van stops, and I can't go any farther, right? And it was snowing, and the tires wouldn't go. The snow was there, right? And so then out of the blue, we're in an exit from an underground parking. So there's nobody's walking there, right? But out of the blue, somebody appears at my window and tells me that if I just move my wheels over here, that I'll be able to make it up, right? And so I do that, and I get out just fine. And I turn around to thank him, and he's nowhere to be found. And so for years, many, many, many years, I told that story that was an angel, right? Because I didn't see him come in and I didn't see him leave. Well, the reality is it was a person who came in, just told me to move my car over so I could get on the gravel so my tires would catch the gravel, right? And then I'm sure that he didn't stick around once he saw me going. He just kept going on his way. He was a student at the university. So let's talk a little bit about how these experiences. Well, let's just go over what kind of experiences really quick. So angels are one, right? near-death experiences,
Yep.
dreams, out-of-body experiences. Um, and then in the charismatic movement, there's all kinds of other things. I remember feathers floating and gold flakes, coming down, and all kinds of things like that. What other kinds of experiences? Anything else that I forgot that people would attribute? Seeing signs. So I saw 3 red cars in a row. That's an experience that people will say. Just anything that's a little bit out of the ordinary for them, people will say that that was an experience with God. Sometimes it's a feeling that people get when they're in a crisis situation. They cry out to God. This is we've talked about this a little bit before. When people, why do they come? If they're not born into Christianity, how do they get into Christianity? It's usually through a crisis, right? So they're in a crisis moment. They cry out to God, and then they feel a sense of peace, right? So they've got all kinds of experiences. There's hundreds, there's thousands of them, I'm sure. But these are some of the more common ones that people would claim are God, are supernatural, are spiritual, are something other than natural.
Yeah, and
am I on the right?
no, yeah, you're right. And then there's even more simple ones like being out in nature and having a very moving experience. And instead of just ascribing that to a moving experience you have in nature, they ascribe it to something more powerful, something supernatural that's taking place, or they'll call it spiritual. Now, I'm all right with the term spiritual being used, kind of like in a poetic fashion, if that's what you're doing, just to be like, oh my goodness, I had a spiritual experience. But I don't think that's the way typically people use it when they're describing that. They actually think it's something supernatural, something spiritual that is not normative, that is not something that happens in the natural realm. And so my concern with using terminology like spiritual or God or angels or supernatural is it convolutes everything. It's not helping the conversation in any way, shape, or form. So even if you're using it poetically, I'm not sure it's useful anymore because it confuses what we're really talking about. If your situation, your experience can be explained scientifically, then just use the terms that science gives. Why convolute it and make it confusing so that people are thinking you're having something that's not natural or something that's supernatural. So I'm all about trying to move people away from the whole natural world of conversation and move it into the more empirical scientific world so that we can start to make sense of terms and start to discuss things that make more sense and get away from the heightened emotional experiences, making people think that they're having some special moment with the supernatural. Their moment may still be special. I'm not saying it's not, because you can have a lot of great experiences and they're wonderful. But yeah, anyway, I'm blabbing, but I'm hoping that's making sense. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm totally on board with that. In fact, I am probably to the extreme where I try to remove all religious language from my vocabulary anymore, and I try to encourage other people to think about why they should do the same, right? Do we really need that kind of religious language? So let's talk a little bit about, well, what is really happening in these experiences? If it's not really angels, if it's not really Jesus sending down all of these things, if it's not really the water dripping off of the statue of Mary or the statue of Jesus, or if it's not really all of these things, what is happening? And I realize we can't address all of them, but you do have some ideas here on what is really actually going on.
Sure, absolutely. Oh, and by the way, I wanted to add one more that I just thought of that I don't remember if you said it or not. Dreams. People have dreams.
Yeah.
You may have credit that. So what is happening? Okay, so initially, when you have your experience, you're going to interpret it in light of your belief system at the time, especially the one that you are sharing with the birds you're flocking together with. Much like the one I had that I expressed about Satan visiting me in my room. That was a belief system. We all believed it. We were on a mission trip. Obviously, Satan was going to attack me because he wants to stop me from doing the Lord's work. So that's the way I interpreted it. I wasn't able to see the fan behind the curtain. You can't see reality because you're so blinded by your view, right? And brainwashing's got you captured. So So the first thing that's going to happen is whenever you initially have the experience, you're going to attribute it to whatever it is your belief system is. So if you have this spiritual type of essence, even if as a non-Christian, that's what you're going to attribute it. Oh, this happened. It was a spiritual moment, and then and you roll with that. You know, I have that's you have that kind of an aura, like the whole Oprah type spirituality. You know, so you're going to attribute it to that kind of thing. If you're a Christian, you might attribute it to the Holy Spirit or to Satan or whatever in that moment. So that's the initial thing. You have a moving experience. You're singing some songs. It brings you to tears. You fall on your face. You're worshiping, and you don't even know why you fell. You don't know why your knees wobbled. You felt the Holy Spirit. That's what you felt. Well, that's not what you felt, but you were told that's what you felt. So that's what you felt. So you felt. So that's the initial moment. But then what happens is over the course of time, every time you recall that memory, you put it through what scientists, especially memory scientists, call reconsolidated memory. That's where, very similarly to where you're opening a Word document and you make a modification and you resave it. Every time you change that document, even the slightest, it's called reconsolidation. And so our memories do that exact same thing. We open that memory and it alters just a little bit more each time to fit what we want it to be, what we remembered it to be, the experience we wish we actually had with it. And so everybody does this. It's not like it's exclusive to just crazy people who want to have great experiences. Whenever you've had a heightened emotional experience, you remember it in the future like a fish story. Oh, I caught this fish. 10 years later, it's I caught this fish. 15 more years, I caught this fish. It was a damn shark, right? And that's what we do with reconsolidated memory. So that initial experience, well, all that happened was I was moved emotionally. The song was powerful. The words were strong. I cried. I fell to my knees. It was the Holy Spirit. 15 years later, it's, God came down. I saw angels. I heard them sing to me. He reached into my chest and beat my heart. I saw it all. It was happening right before me. And these people spoke in tongues. And you just have more. There's more that happened than actually happened. And it's not because you think you're making it up. You actually think what you're remembering is what happens. That's what reconsolidation does. We create these new memories, and once it's saved, we are convinced that that's the original memory. And it's so far removed from what actually happened. The only thing you can do to try to figure out what actually happens is to investigate it like a detective would, just putting together natural things, trying to wonder, okay, what would have actually happened if we just use empirical evidence? What was really present there? Who was there? Maybe examine some people and find out what really happened in that moment. Were there songs present? Okay, you most likely just felt, you know what I'm saying? You can examine it using regular detective work to put together enough pieces to say, okay, it's unlikely God came down, you heard angels, and he stuck his hand in your heart. More than likely, you heard an emotional song, tears fell down, you wobbled, you fell to your face. It happens to everybody. It's happened to me, even not being a Christian, just some very moving song, maybe not that dramatic, but still something brings you to tears. You're just like, wow, that's amazing. But if I let it get to me that I'm having some spiritual experience 10 years from now, you know what? That's going to be, I was driving down the road and God raised my car and it was flying for a bit. I swear to God, it was flying. You know what I'm saying? That's where it's going to go. But
right.
And I would be convinced that that was true. It's not like I'm lying. I would be convinced I heard angels. That's what reconsolidation does.
It's interesting as I was reading this from your book in preparation for today's episode. I had a conversation with a friend yesterday, and I was telling him the story about when I got arrested, and the cops handcuffed me and perp walked me, in front of my kids and that kind of stuff. And for the life of me, I could not remember the details of why I got arrested. I could only remember the part where I'm saying I didn't do anything. That's the only part that I can remember. And I know that there had to be more of the story. And I'm trying to tell him the story. And I'm like, I know there had to be more. There had to be some reason why the cops came, right? but I just kept saying, I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. And literally, that's the only thing that I can remember, even though I tried very, very hard to be honest and remember what it was. I cannot remember. And so it was like, okay, so that reconsolidated memory thing can go in every different direction. And so it doesn't always have to be spiritual. In fact, I've seen it in my own family, especially with my sisters. Oh my goodness, the stories I hear some of my sisters tell, I'm like, no, that didn't happen at all. Or that happened completely differently than the way that you see it. So I think this concept is something that we use to deny personal responsibility for all kinds of things in our life, as well as turn something into something spiritual, something supernatural, right? That really wasn't. So I think about the praise and worship service, which I loved that part of church. And I think most people loved that part of church. But I can have that exact same experience in another concert that has nothing to do with Jesus, has nothing to do with God. You know, you just go to a concert and just being around people and having music is meant to be emotional. It's meant to drive your emotions in whatever way that music is going, right? It's going to drive your emotions. And being around other people, that energy all comes together, and together you all experience these emotions. And so it makes it feel like a supernatural experience. But, you know, really, that's not what's happening, right?
No, for certain not. And and much like we talked in last week, the whole idea of faith alone, Christians, especially like pastors, will tell their flock, the most important thing you can tell when you're sharing the gospel is your personal testimony. You know, share your experiences with God, because that's what people need to hear. Well, of course, that's what people need to hear, because that's the only thing they're going to hear that actually makes any sense, because there's no evidence for it anywhere else. So you have to share all these dramatic experiences. And then, of course, you know, with reconsolidated memory, you love that so much, and that feels so good. Oh my goodness, I had an experience with God, and so I just build upon it all the time. But the reality is that the whole personal experience idea to prove faith, and that's what people do. Like, I've had teenagers and I write about a couple of them in my book that have expressed to me, you know, many times, like, but I had an experience with God. I remember angels singing to me, so I know God is real. Okay, I believe you had an experience. I don't deny that at all, but I don't believe your experience was what you remember it being. But they're so convinced, because that is the only substance that they have to prove their own faith in themselves, because there is no evidence for God. So I have something that happened to me. I believe it was God. So therefore, after 5 years of remembering it differently each time, I'm now convinced God came down and spoke to me directly and said, "You will be my child." Oh my God, angels sang to me. You know what I mean? Like, it's mind blowing.
Yes.
But you're absolutely right on what you
Yep.
were saying about emotional experiences with stuff that isn't even to do with Christianity. Uh, I, I've been listening lately. For some reason, I just got into this mood where I'm listening to The Greatest Showman. I just love that movie. So good. If you've never seen it, man, I highly recommend it. It's about Barnum and Bailey. You know, but particularly Barnum and his story about how he, you know, became the greatest showman, kind of thing. But the music in this show, I mean, in this movie, oh my goodness, it's just so powerful. Some of these songs, you know, I like today I found myself listening to them over and I must listen to one of them 50 times. I just love it. You know, a million dreams is all it's going to take. You know, a million dreams to, you know, to for the world we're going to make. Like, it's just, the lyrics are moving and powerful, and they bring me to tears, because I dream myself too, and I'm like, yeah, you know, and I'm driving down there, I'm like, yeah, a million dreams is all it's gonna take, you know, and I find myself getting all emotionally invested, you know, I'm gonna do it, you know, if I believed that this was a spiritual experience, do you know what this would turn into 5 years from now? It would be ridiculous. God came down, I was going to change the world with this book, you know. I sure hope I do, but I don't believe God told me to do it. I don't think it's a spiritual experience. I just believe I landed on something pretty powerful here, and I hope it actually works. That's it. Simple as that.
Let's talk about dreams.
Yeah.
So people often think that God speaks to them in their dreams. Does God speak to us in our dreams?
Well, no, since I don't think God exists.
Okay, so what's
No.
happening? That is that part of this reconsolidated memory thing, or what's happening there in the dreams?
Dreams are interesting. I know that a lot has been done, a lot of research has been done on dreams and how they work, um, and things throughout your day that can cause them to come about. I haven't studied that research enough to be able to comment on it very much. So I'm hoping that you have and can give us more insight on that. What I do know is it's not God. So it can be explained by the natural realm. I'm pretty confident in that. Now, if I go to study dreams and I come to discover that there's absolute evidence for God there, okay, I will go back to being a believer. For now, I'm pretty convinced that's not going to happen, but maybe you can explain it better.
Yeah, so I don't have any 100% proof on that. I do think that it has a lot to do with what is happening in our world and the things that we're putting into our mind, whether it's the music we listen to, the TV shows, the books, the people we talk to, the things that we do during the day, just our worries. That's a huge part of what is happening in our dreams as well. But also, I think above and beyond that, a lot of it has to do with our subconscious, and I do think that our subconscious comes forward at nighttime when we are not conscious, right? And so all kinds of things could be happen with our subconscious there. And so I don't want to get necessarily into that whole, because that could be a whole nother episode, all right, on how the subconscious works and everything like that. So I don't want to get into that. But the reason that I brought up dreams is people like, or characters, I should say, like Moses and Paul. I guess it wasn't Moses. He didn't really have a dream. He had that spiritual experience with the burning bush, or the spiritual experience on top of Mount Sinai, or the spiritual experience with when he's out in the wilderness hiding from God. I mean, Moses, he had all kinds of these spiritual experiences, right?
Well,
So
you could go to Daniel with dreams if you're
yep.
looking for a parallel.
So Moses had all these spiritual experiences. Daniel had a bunch of dreams, and then Paul had a dream, and this is just one of my favorite ones. Is that really, when we look at the evidence that we have for the authenticity of the books of the New Testament, we don't have any evidence for authenticity for any of the Gospels. We don't have any evidence.
I'm sorry, just a second. Did I say Daniel? I meant Joseph if I said Daniel.
Okay, well, Daniel had a bunch of dreams too, right? Or he interpreted.
Yeah, he interpreted other people's dreams mostly, but Joseph had the dream. Anyway, right. Just wanted to clarify in case I spoke wrong. Yeah. Back to you.
Yeah. So we don't have much. In fact, we don't have anything that gives us evidence for the authenticity of the Gospels or the Book of Acts, and half of Paul's epistles probably were not written by Paul. And most of the rest of the books of the New Testament are pretty questionable as well. So we are limited to these 7 epistles of Paul, which is kind of what we have. And I think back to it, and what did it all start with? With Paul. It all started with a dream. It all started with a dream. And sometimes I wonder, did this whole Christian religion start with a dream by Paul, kind of like Mormonism started with a dream by Joseph Smith, right? And so we've got who knows what was happening in Paul's life at the time. We know what's in the books, right? But what if we built our whole life based upon somebody else's dream that didn't come from God? It was just a dream. It was just something that came up overnight. Some people think he might be smoking drugs or something, but literally that's kind of what I think about when I look back at the characters in the Bible now. And Joseph and Daniel are good examples, Moses, but Paul especially. That's where Christianity came from. That's really the only evidence that we have for Christianity, and it all started with a dream.
Yeah, and of course, theologians would distinguish between dreams and visions. Right. I mean, that's a big deal in theology, obviously. I mean, I don't believe in visions, so So yes, God is not giving people visions. So clearly, what you're suggesting is that they're parallel, and I would agree with that now. But that was almost why I brought Joseph back in, because I know Daniel had a bunch of visions. Joseph interpreted dreams, even though they're all synonymous. But yes, Paul had a vision, a dream.
Alexa. All right. So where am I? All right. So just like any addiction that you need to quit, once the brainwashing has been removed, you pick a time and you stop.
Yeah, and don't leave just yet. We want to encourage you to take a moment and subscribe, like, and drop a comment here. And if you want to join our really fast growing community of ex-Christians on Facebook, click on the link in the description below.
All right. And if you enjoyed this week's discussion, maybe you want to leave us a tip in the tip jar and join us next week as we continue to peel back the years of brainwashing. Until next time, break your God addiction with answers from Genesis.